Hey guys, today I'm gonna show you how I get that film look using the Dehancer in DaVinci Resolve. Alright, let's get straight into it. First, just import your footage into DaVinci. So at this point, I've already cut up all my footage and lay everything out in the Edit tab. I also threw in a few transitions here in the Edit tab. Then jump into the Color tab. This is where the magic starts. Just take one of your clips to get started. I'm gonna go with this clip since the lighting is pretty balanced, so it's a good starting point. For this tutorial, I'm only gonna use for nodes to keep things simple and easy to follow. Then search for color space transform and place on the first and last nodes to handle the input and output. I'm just gonna label the nodes real quick so everything stays organized and easier to follow later. So the third node is where I'll be adding Dehancer, and I'm naming the second node balance for basic corrections. Alright, go to the first node. This is where we set up the input CST. Since I'm working with HLG footage, I'll set the input color space to rec.2020 and the gamut to rec.2100 HLG. Then I'll convert it to DaVinci Wide Gamut and DaVinci Intermediate. This basically gives us more room to work with when grading. Now in the CST out node, I'll set the input to DaVinci Wide Gamut and DaVinci Intermediate, then convert it to rec.709. Since I'm on a Mac, I'll use rec.709A so the colors show up correctly. Now let's see what kind of difference that made. Next, jump to the third node. This is where we add Dehancer to start building that film look. Just search for it in the FX tab and drag it onto the node. At first, it might look a bit weird, but don't worry, that's totally normal. For now, just turn off all the tools in Dehancer. Then set the source to DaVinci Wide Gamut Intermediate in the input settings. We'll notice there are a lot of settings here like exposure, temperature, tint, and more, but for now, just leave everything as it is. We'll come back to these later. I usually start in the print section. Make sure it's enabled. Then pick a profile. There are a lot of options here, so you can experiment. For this one, I'm going with Kodak Endura Glossy Paper for a slightly softer look. A lot of people use Kodak 2383, but we'll skip that for now. Here, I'm gonna bring the exposure down a bit since it's a bit too bright, then add a touch of contrast. Just tweak it based on your clip, and don't overdo it. You still want it to look natural. Then I'll add a bit of color density by pushing it to the right, just to make the colors feel a bit richer. You can see the colors start to look a bit deeper and more film-like. Now let's jump into the Film tab. I'm gonna go with Kodak Vision 350D. It gives a nice clean look. You can try other profiles too. There are plenty of options here. You'll also see a push and pull slider here, which basically lets you tweak the exposure of the film. Next, jump into the Film Developer section and turn it on. You'll see options like Contrast Boost, Gamma Correction, and Color Boost. I'm just gonna tweak these slightly to add more depth and bring the footage to life. Just keep it subtle, don't push it too far. Next, jump into the Film Compression tab. I'm gonna lower the impact a bit and tweak the white point to soften the highlights. One thing I really like about Dehancer is how easy it is to use. The interface is super user-friendly, and the controls are simple enough for beginners, but still powerful enough to get really solid results. Then in the Expand tab, I'm gonna tweak the black and white points a bit. The black point controls how deep the shadows get, and the white point controls how bright the highlights are. Just keep it subtle so it still looks natural. On the third node, I'm gonna add a parallel node. This is where I'll add effects like grain, halation, and blue. I keep this separate so I can control these effects independently without affecting the main grading. For the film grain, you can zoom in on your clip to see it more clearly. I'm gonna pick a profile that's not too heavy, and you can adjust the amount to control how strong the grain is. Here, I'm going with the 65mm ISO 50 profile, and I'm keeping the amount low. If you push it too far, it can easily start to ruin the image. Next, let's move on to halation. This is what gives you that soft glow around highlights, something you naturally get with real film. Without it, your footage can feel a bit too clean and digital. Next, let's add a bit of bloom as well to soften the highlights even more and give the image a smoother, more cinematic look. There are also a bunch of other effects in Dehancer like film damage, film breath, and vignette, but I'm not gonna use them for this one since I want to keep the look clean and natural. Alright, now let's take a look at the result from these two Dehancer nodes. Here's the before and the after. You can already see a big difference in the overall look. Now I'm gonna move to the last node, the balance node, and make a few final tweaks. Since this was shot in the afternoon with cloudy light, it feels a bit too cool, so I'm gonna warm it up slightly to get a more natural look. Here, I'm also increasing the temperature slightly to bring out that warm evening look in the footage. I'll also tweak the curves. A simple S-curve is usually enough to add contrast and depth. Just keep it subtle and don't overdo it. I'm gonna fine-tune the lift, gamma, and gain to shape the look a bit more. The skin tones feel slightly too strong, so I'll go into color slice and reduce the skin saturation to keep it looking more natural and balanced. Now let's take a look at the final grade. Here's the before and after. I think this is already solid, so next we can apply it to the rest of the clips by grabbing a still and applying the gray. Since some clips might not perfectly match the grade, we'll make small adjustments in the balance node to keep everything consistent across the timeline and avoid anything looking overdone. Once everything feels ready, just hit export and this is the final result. If you're interested in Dehancer, you can use my promo code ROMIDehancer to get 10% off on their website. One more thing, Dehancer Film Emulation is now available on the App Store, so you can use it directly on your iPhone. I'm testing it here on a photo of my wife, and here's how it looks. It still keeps that same film aesthetic, just in a mobile version. And that's it for this video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.